I was sitting on my porch that morning, beer in hand, when two police officers walked up my driveway like they were storming a bank, flashlights out, hands on their belts, faces set. And behind them, Heather Lawson, the president of Lakeview Estates, HOA, came out of the trees and pointed at me like I'd just confessed a felony, shouting, "Arrest him. He doesn't own that land anymore." For a second, I thought it was a bad joke till I realized she meant it, and that she'd happily use other people's authority to take what she wanted. That 3-second moment, the badge, the shout at the finger, that's where everything changed. My name is Ron Hunter. I'm a retired construction guy. I built this porch with my own hands, nailed every plank into place, stained the wood 3 times because I loved how the grain caught the light. 4 acres behind my house, a narrow dirt trail that cuts down to the lake. That trail is the thing that started a war. At first, I didn't mind people using it. Kids rode bikes there and summer walkers took the shortcut, dogs romped. But when I started finding beer cans and wrappers piled neatly in front of my little "Please Private Property" sign, I realized those weren't accidents. They were messages. Then came the diaper. Jesus, a used baby diaper sunk under my maple tree like somebody wanted to spit in my yard and call it rain. I went out and told a few teenagers to pick up their mess. A tall blonde kid smirked and said, "Relax, old man. Everybody uses this trail. My mom runs the HOA." That line landed like a weight. A few days later, Heather showed up at my door, 1 foot over my welcome mat, and the first thing she said wasn't "excuse me" or "could we talk," it was, "You stay away from my sons." She didn't come for the trail because of the kids. Those kids were the blunt edge of her entitlement. She came because she thought she could steamroll me. So I put up a new sign. Not the polite plywood one, a heavy metal, "No trespassing, violators will be prosecuted." Sign bolted into concrete. I poured the mix with my own hands, hammered the post in, and for the first time in weeks I felt like something in me was anchored again. 2 days later, there was a perfectly placed crushed beer can under the sign like a dare. The next morning, 3. Then, trash ringed neatly around the base. Footprints, kids' shoes, expensive soles, and one adult, wider print, and it dawned on me this wasn't about a path. This was about power. I could have taken it down. I could have rolled over and saved myself the headache. Instead, I did what I always did on the job I documented. I called my buddy Tom Peterson, who happens to practice law and hates a bully more than the rest of town hates mosquitoes. "Put up cameras," he said. "Good ones. Let them make mistakes." So, I wired the place like Fort Knox 4 cameras night vision cloud backup, and I slept uneasy but ready. Less than 24 hours later, my phone lit up with a motion alert. I pulled the feed and watched 2 men in khaki polos with Lakeview Estates embroidered over the chest march down my trail carrying a crowbar. The one with the tool jammed it under the post and flatly pulled the sign out of the concrete like he was unearthing a small tree. I heard them on the audio, clear as day. Heather said, "Break it." She's sick of looking at that thing. They yanked it, spat on it, and walked off like they hadn't stolen the last ounce of civility from their community. My hands shook, but I didn't chase them. Tom's voice in my head told me to let the tape breathe to get the evidence into the right hands. So I saved the file, backed it up, and filed a complaint. Then I opened an envelope that looked like it had been mimeographed from the Department of Official Intimidation. A thick HOA letter on Lakeview Estates letterhead demanding I remove the sign within 48 hours or face formal citation and civil action on behalf of the community. They even included some grand-sounding line about an historical easement. I read it, then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because people will lie beautifully when they think no one can see the brushstrokes. For a while, I felt like I was the only sane person in a play where everyone else had memorized the villain's part. The sheriff's deputy who first came out tried to lecture me. You can't just shut off public access, and the tone of his voice told me he'd already made a choice about whose side to believe. When Sergeant Dugan told me, "Take the sign down, or we'll escalate," the meaning was clear. Sometimes power is just language that sounds like law. I remember standing on my porch after they left, feeling that old pulse of rage and then a different thing, a slow, sinking doubt. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe I'd been the prickly neighbor. Maybe I was making trouble where none should be made. I sat in my kitchen with cold coffee and could feel that small voice, tired, lonely, wondering if the world had moved on and left me in the dust. I almost called Tom back and told him to drop it. I almost took the sign down and slept. But then I thought of the porch I built the nights I'd spent listening to wind through the oaks, the idea that a little man's boundary could be walked over because someone in a blazer decided it would be funny. I thought of the diaper. I thought of the crowbar video, and I found a different kind of stubborn. I didn't stand up because I wanted to be right. I stood up because nobody deserves to be bullied out of their own life. The break came when an anonymous email slid into my inbox. You're not crazy. Not. She forged everything. Attached a packet that looked like proof from a whistleblower inside the HOA, a scanned easement with a pixelated crooked signature metadata showing it was created last month, an email thread where Heather told board members to push him off the trail, and a 6-second clip of Heather saying, "I don't care what the law says, that land is ours now." I fed that to Tom and he stopped calling me by my first name and started talking like a shark circling. File everything he said. An injunction, criminal referral, civil suit. Don't touch anyone, don't talk to Heather. Let them hang themselves. The courthouse smelled like old paper and possibility. I walked in with a thumb drive full of time-stamped video and audio and an envelope of digital copies of the forged easement. The clerk looked at the footage, then at me, then barked a half-laugh that meant she'd seen worse and knew where this would sit on the pile in the weird but actionable folder. Things shifted fast after that. The board had to answer questions. Heather had to explain why her name appeared on multiple versions of a document with different dates. The men with the crowbar got nervous when I started showing the footage around. Their smirks faded when I mentioned that the audio identified Heather by name. The cops who'd lectured me suddenly became careful with their words when I asked for badge numbers and told them I was recording. The town started to whisper. The turning point, the thing you could feel in the room, was the hearing where Tom played the clip. After that, Heather stopped talking like a president and started talking like someone trying to rearrange a story to fit a narrative. She denied, obfuscated, blamed context. My stomach dropped with every falsehood she offered, but the judge had the tape. The judge watched the tape. The judge paused and said quietly, "This is serious. That's not applause. That's the sound of a gavel getting ready to be used the right way." Heather was suspended from her duties pending investigation. Criminal referrals for forgery and property destruction were filed. The HOA had to open the books. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. And the most satisfying part wasn't the legal jargon or the judge's look. It was the exact moment her face, always composed and polished and convinced, lost color and power. She went from a woman who could point and command to a defendant listening to the proof against her. I walked out of the courthouse without dancing, without chest-thumping. The sign spot by the trail was still bare, the concrete still broken, an ugly little monument to what had happened, but I felt lighter. Not triumphant, just righted. The best part was simple truth documented and time-stamped will bend authority back into the shape of law. Heather lost the reins she'd been abusing. The board had to answer for the papers they'd adopted without asking whose ink it truly was, and the people who thought muscle and a logo could substitute for honesty had to sit in rooms and explain themselves. I went home, sat on my porch, and for once I let the wind be just wind. You don't get a parade for doing what's yours, you get the slow uncrumbling of an insult. The lesson was small and sharp. If someone is taking what's yours with forged words and loud voices, document everything. Evidence doesn't shout, it shows.